All right, so look, we've heard a lot from our technologists and our vendors this morning, but a lot of you are on the front lines of delivering AI, and as Aaron quickly joins us, I've got a couple of gents here who are also on the front line of delivering AI, but in our case for SHI. So I'm hoping that what we're going to get for the next 25 minutes or so is a really practical session on the real-world application of generative AI technologies. And I think hopefully it's going to be super relevant given what we saw when we did our hype cycle Slido question earlier. And sort of 69% of you in the room were either in that peak of inflated expectation or on the slope of enlightenment. Great to see that only sort of 19% were in that trough of disillusionment. And even for you 19%, hopefully this session may just help you kind of get out of it and back onto that slope of enlightenment. So we hopefully will have some time for questions. So we'll either do the usual mic runners, or if you want to use the Slido app, you can put a written question into the Slido app and it will magically appear on this iPad in front of me, which kind of means if you want to ask the really tricky questions, but you don't want to be called out, that's the way to do it. Stay anonymous if you like. Okay, so look, joining me on the sofa today are John Moran and Aaron Richmond, both from SHI. Gents, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourselves quickly?
Sure. I'm John Moran. I'm the product director responsible for SHI's generative AI initiative called Project Mindspark, and I've been running that for the last 2 years.
Excellent.
Hey everybody, Aaron Richmond. I'm on the applied AI team at SHI. Prior to joining SHI, I was at Amazon and AWS for almost 9 years. Did security reviews on their APIs, did hundreds of integrations in their marketplace, and worked on their AWS team for many of the top strategic partners.
Excellent. So look, John, we're here to talk about Project Mindspark, and you were very clear to correct me yesterday when we were chatting, and I referred to it as an app. Got himself in all sorts of trouble there.
More than an app.
Yeah, so obviously we had 154 of these customers came to the AI labs yesterday, so they got a small taste of what Mindspark looks like when they probably met you manning the stand there in the AI lab. But for everyone else, and let's kind of introduce the broader Project Mindspark. What's that all about?
Yeah, so Project Mindspark is SHI's internal generative AI initiative. Started about 18 months ago. Ty reached out to my boss and was like, hey, you see this ChatGPT thing? Like, I think there's something here. Like, we need to do AI. So my boss relayed that to me. And so, at that time, there wasn't a lot of blueprints for how to bring AI safely and effectively into an enterprise. So we were like, all right, let's fail fast, let's learn quickly, and just try to focus on things that we know Gen AI can do well, the basics. And ultimately, that broke down into kind of 4 areas that we're using to deliver value to SHI. So talent development or coaching, so using AI to provide guidance and coaching to people, kind of walk alongside them as they do their job, help them improve, help them make changes. Analytics, so tapping into where we have high quality data to provide simplified insights to leadership, frontline people. Customer support, so we automate our service desk and we have a number of internal chat bots that help people find information more readily. And then lastly, just general productivity, and this is the Mindspark app. So the Mindspark app is part of it, just one piece of it, but that's our Mindspark platform. It's really a literacy and app builder platform that's used by about 3,000 of our 6,000 users every week. It's driving about 4 hours of productivity savings a week for people, and it's been a huge part of kind of our AI literacy program to just kind of democratize AI and make sure people are comfortable and know how to use it. So over that time, we've learned a lot. We've failed a lot more. So yeah, excited to talk about kind of what those were.
Excellent. So it's fair to say that we are well on our journey, right? We're probably on that slope of enlightenment if we want to look at ourselves in the hype cycle.
Yeah.
You're that little bit more enlightened every day, I imagine. And I guess, you're enlightened by both the successes and the failures, right?
Sure.
They both inform. So let's kind of open it up. Sorry, but there's more audience participation. There always is at these SHI events. So if you don't mind grabbing your cell phone and logging into that Slido app by using the QR code, or if you still have it open, we have a question that we'd love to pose to you to find out where you are on your journey. So what stage is your organization at in deploying AI solutions? And Obviously, we realize there are a lot of different types of AI solutions, and it would be a very complicated question and response if we try to include all the different variations. So just be generic in your responses and help us understand where you are, because that will help John and Aaron as they then start to respond to some of my questions, and we can kind of tailor our responses to what the majority of the room is telling us. So we'll try and get as close to 100 as we can responses. We're not far off. We're well over 50 at the moment. But I think we've got a fairly clear set of results coming towards us, right? So a lot of people, I suppose, here at the event actually for discovery purposes and starting to think about how they could actually do the real-world application of AI. So while that just continues to build out and we just get over 100, Aaron, like you can see the results there, the same as the audience can. How does that kind of mirror or reflect the conversations that you're having with customers in the real world?
Yeah, I mean, it mirrors it perfectly. We kind of see 3 stages of AI: new to AI, secondly would be like scaling AI, and then at the final kind of optimizing it and really going big with it. But I think the good part here is that people are not just diving in and investing a lot of money, they're actually taking some care in their AI strategy. And that'd be the great majority of the conversations that we're having. So kind of where we start, and John mentioned this earlier, is around use cases. I think the thing to think about with AI is, for those of you that are technical, if you remember, when frameworks came out or importing packages, whether it was with Java or Python, AI is kind of just like an extension of new coding tools. And so instead of having to be explicit with your decision making, you can actually delegate some decision making to AI. So when you're thinking about your use cases, you think about 2 things. One of them would be data readiness. So if you have good data ready and it's a low complexity problem, that can be low hanging fruit that you guys start with in your AI strategy. And then if you're kind of melding kind of the cultural part of it, teaching people how to use it with some small problem to start with, that's how you can build the momentum inside your teams, and also to show that ROI from these small, low-hanging fruit types of projects. So it's actually a great place to begin, is in the planning and kind of use case development stage.
Cool. And we can see that the 16%, so a minority, which is great to see, but nonetheless, we have some folks in the room who are sort of yet to get started on their AI journey. So John, I'm going to come back to you. Let's kind of rewind maybe, I don't know, 12 months or so, probably a little bit longer than that. But one of the key challenges for a lot of organizations and IT leaders is kind of figuring out what the first use cases are going to be, right? And I'm sure that's a process that you must have gone through as well. So talk us through how you and the team kind of decided on those first use cases that we were going to use Mindspark to address.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when I think about getting started, I think when our experience, I think about 2 things. One of them, use cases for sure. You need to find a way to identify those low-hanging fruit use cases. You need to find a way to deliver wins to the organization quickly. There's a lot of skepticism, a lot of hype, a lot of misinformation. You need to find a way to deliver value quickly with a low cost, low complexity, low risk. And there are use cases like that. We have a process that we go through to analyze use cases, and I'm not going to necessarily go through that whole process today, but typically it boils down to internal use cases, leveraging basic customization techniques. So can I accomplish this with prompt engineering? Can I accomplish this with RAG? Things like fine-tuning and customizing models create a lot of complexity and risk that really aren't necessary if you're just getting started. So just making sure you know how to identify the low-hanging fruit, know how to get started, and start delivering quick wins quickly. The second thing is we learned very quickly that this isn't really a technology problem. Like the technology, I'm not trying to sound like pretentious, but the technology was relatively straightforward once you get acquainted with it, but it's the people problem. It's the change management. Really, that was the big problem. So we've really focused on change management. We used a framework that we had used already, the people, process, technology. Don't reinvent strategy, just use any strategies that have worked for you guys, with a big focus on people and process. And from people, it's about creating a culture of AI, integrating AI into how you work. It's a part of our onboarding process now. I host office hours every 2 weeks. We have this Mindspark platform that people are using every day. AI literacy is so important. You can invest in this wonderful AI system, but if no one's willing or ready to use it effectively, it's a massive waste of money. So you need to make sure you invest in culture and adoption. And then process is really that process of analyzing use cases. you're going to get a ton of wonderful ideas, but you need to create a system to prioritize them effectively, and there are systems out there. Just at ChatGPT or Google it. There's a lot of really great systems. We have our own that we can share with you. But it's really those two things: people, process, and then I guess technology as well, but really people and process.
All right, so let's zero in on that technology, because I feel like I want to set you up for a fight here, because you just kind of said it really wasn't about the technology, and you sat next to a solutions architect. So I kind of think, Aaron, I feel like I need to give you the right of reply on this one. Tell us about how how the team settled on how we were going to deploy Mindspark, because obviously there's a plethora of ways you could have done it. Yep. How did we, probably explain what we did, and then why did we choose that method?
Yeah, I'd say, you think about the different roles and possibilities when you're building your teams, but what we saw in SHI was we already had good software engineers. And so when you start with that, like I mentioned before, AI is really just a new programming set, right, of tools. So your software engineers are really going to glom onto it and enjoy programming, bringing in a model, leveraging a vector database like a Chroma or a Pinecone or any of these different options that you have. So we started, we have an environment in Azure DevOps, and we're doing a lot of the applications with, from Python perspective, because a lot of the data science, Jupyter Notebooks, all that is written in Python. But then we also have a lot of C# developers and things like that. So you can have front ends really however you want, from React, et cetera. But taking those software engineers and putting them into an environment they were familiar with, and then giving them new tools, and then have a good product leadership to actually define those use cases, write those user stories. They're able to take those and leverage tools that they're fairly familiar with, but then also excited to use these new tools. So I'd say, start with your software engineers, look at your existing tools, and then see, based on the plethora of options that you have out there, maybe even have some of their senior developers or architects take a look at the tools and kind of weigh the pros and cons, because you're going to make a little bit of an investment inside the ecosystem that you decide on. So it could be in cloud, and maybe when you reach a steady state, you actually want to bring that on-prem and manage it yourself. But I just say, start with software engineers, your product leadership, and then decide on a set of tools and an ecosystem that you're comfortable with.
Excellent. So we've got some great questions coming in. Thank you for that. And I'm glad that we're running early, because it's going to give us time to actually get to some of those questions. Before we do that, though, we have our second and final, you'll be glad to know, audience participation poll for this session. And I think it follows on very nicely from what you were saying, Aaron. You got to make a lot of decisions. Some of those decisions are easier to make than others. So curious to get a read on the room. What are the biggest challenges that you foresee in implementing AI in your organizations? Whether those are challenges that you are kind of facing here and now, ones perhaps you have already overcome or expect to encounter in the next couple of months.
Yep.
So we're seeing a much more sort of even split this time around, which I think we probably anticipated, given that there are many decisions, there are many challenges. Let's give it another sort of 20 seconds to build out, and then I'm going to have you guys respond to that. And I think on this green one's probably going to stay where it is. So the data quality and being data AI ready is going to probably stay out front. So let's get ahead of the closing of the poll. And Aaron, let me come back to you and say, okay, for those people that this applies to and they're kind of staring down the barrel of this challenge, any kind of words of wisdom that you'd want to share?
Yeah, so I'll bring back one of the conversations that I had kind of debate with John a while back. So coming from kind of a data pipeline background, you see all the data and legacy opportunities there with the data. And so you want to think about how you can munge it and get it to a high quality state. But then John's basically just like, why don't you just start with good data? And so I was like, all right, well, that's a good point there. So I would say, yeah, if you have data that you're very confident in, quality data, start with those use cases, because you're not going to have as many things like hallucinations or inaccuracies when you're doing prompting on it. So start there. But in terms of actually thinking about a data strategy and getting to data quality, you heard about it earlier with the IDC presenter, data governance. So that's a huge topic, aside from the quality data that you have, and that comes into having a data pipeline. There's a kind of a best practice architecture called a medallion architecture, where you have your bronze data, which is like your data lake or your data warehouse. you're silver, and then you're getting to a gold standard where you have data as product, which would be consumed by the different applications or even into training. And so from a data governance perspective, that means not only role-based access security, but also attribute-based access controls. So you can do things like that with Unity Catalog and Databricks, Microsoft Fabric. There's other tools out there to help you do that. But you have to really think about your data governance strategy because it has security downstream and then also helps you when you're actually creating these line of business products. So I'd say data governance, data quality.
So let's pick up on that because I want to bring in John because you and I have had a conversation about, I'm going to paraphrase you and then you can correct me, but you were saying something about let the data lead you, right? And I was thinking that you must have been able to look at the data that was available to us when we were standing up Mindspark, and you were probably like, well, that data is probably better than that data, therefore I'm going to prioritize the use case that that data supports. Is that kind of a fair way of looking at it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it can be overwhelming to look at your whole data estate and say like, oh, this isn't ready for AI. And there are products that will require you to get your general AI state in a better place. And so being able to build it yourself like we have allows us to kind of focus on specific data sets and build applications around them. So that is a luxury that we have as building versus buying. But yeah, so I mean, for us, we have our dynamic system, which has a ton of really incredible information about customers and other things. And I would love to be able to set up a system where users can talk to that data and interface with it and answer questions. But realistically, it's not really in a state where they could get value out of that. So I looked at where do we have good data, and all of you do have good data somewhere. You certainly have a lot of bad data like we have, but there are sets somewhere in there that are valuable. So we manage trip notes. So we send a trip note after every meeting, and we're required to send a meeting recap of here's what happened, and that's a process that exists and data that's relatively accurate. So I was like, all right, let's just build something around that. It's a little clunky, but it's basically email, and we're basically just parsing data out of email and storing that. And we're able to get a window into all of the conversations that are happening between SHI and our customers so we can better support you all. So, traditionally you would think like, you got to build a data lake, you got to organize, your enterprise apps. But, we just looked at what we have and we built a use case around that and delivered a ton of value really quickly without a lot of complexity, without a lot of risk, a lot of data requirements. So it's something to think about. Again, non-technical person just thinking like, where do we have good data? Let's just start there.
Makes a lot of sense. So look, being honest with the room, we hadn't actually planned to cover this particular question, so John and Aaron are about to hate me. But since we've got security risks coming up in second place, and actually we've got a number of questions about it coming up on the app, I feel like we have to address it. So maybe let's try and relate it back to Mindspark. And I'm going to start with Aaron first, but I'll come to John in a second. Like, clearly, when we decided that we were using basically an OpenAI on Azure, I think that's the basic platform that we at least started with. I'm not sure if we're still on that, but how do you weigh up the security concerns about sort of a cloud-based platform, what data we might have on site or on-prem, what IP we might own? Like, how do you go about sort of evaluating and then addressing security concerns?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I was really impressed with when I came onto SHI is kind of the way that they built the AI enterprise platform. So there's ways that you can do it. You can take off-the-shelf stuff and do some great things like with Copilot, et cetera. But I think if you're really playing the long game, actually building an AI enterprise strategy and a platform that you can drive value from internally with your own domain experts, et cetera. So from a security perspective, I'd say the most unsecure would be just like putting company data out on the wire to ChatGPT and going back and forth. That's like the least secure way to do things. But if you're actually bringing it inside of your organization, you get several different value creation opportunities. One, you're building internal capabilities, right, of your teams and how you do AI, understanding the technology, understanding the ability to create and prioritize use cases. And then from a security perspective, what you're able to do, there's something kind of newish that's coming out in prompt engineering called language model programs. And what you can do with that is, instead of having a blanket prompt, you can actually start treating your prompts with parameters. So just as when you're designing an API, right? You can do like regular expressions. Say you're expecting an account ID and that's 10 digits long. You can start to filter things that go into your prompt. So that's one area. And then we also wanted to be able to use RAG on specific document sources. So that's another way to kind of limit your attack vector, is to have it maybe on a source of documents within a folder, and then you can wrap security around that in terms of whether you use an Active Directory or some other type of identity and access management system on that document set, right? So now you're starting to think about layers of security for your data access, for your applications, for what comes in and outside of the prompt. And then you can also do added benefits besides security, like unit cost metrics and things like that. So I'd say think in terms of layers instead of going everything out and back from ChatGPT. You have a lot of opportunities to build that yourself.
Cool. Anything you want to add to that?
I guess generally what I've learned is good cybersecurity hygiene is good AI hygiene. Like, it's a new workload, same concepts. Like it's if you have good identity and access management, you have good general security policies, you're going to be in a good place as it relates to AI. That being said, there are new threat vectors that are introduced by doing, I think, more training than inference. Model injection, prompt injection, things like that you need to be aware of. But generally speaking, good security hygiene is good AI hygiene. And you can really manage your risks by just moving slowly. Prompt engineering, very, very low risk. It's really just at inference time, you're putting in data, and then as long as you're not saving that, it's gone. RAG is also the most secure way to really bring your data into a model and customize it. Fine-tuning, training, that's really where you're actually changing the weights and parameters of a model. You're putting data into it. That presents a lot more risk. So it's really about moving slowly. And then I guess last thing, the culture element is really important too, because there's a whole, this doesn't cover it necessarily, but the responsible AI element is also really important to us. There are biases, there are things in this model that are going to propagate existing biases, and you need to be aware of that, and your people need to be aware of that as they're using it to make sure they understand what a hallucination is. They understand that there are things that it's projecting that maybe aren't accurate. So education is also a great way to manage risk as well. It's worked for us.
Excellent. We have a ton of questions here, chaps.
I'm sure we do.
We could be here for an hour. We won't. We talked earlier about some of the process that you went through to identify and prioritize use cases. Clearly that resonates with a chunk of people in the room as well. I want you just to quickly expand on something that you and I have talked about before, which is, kind of going for the small quick wins, right?
Sure.
Don't be too ambitious too early.
Yeah. I mean, we say, don't solve billion-dollar problems, solve million-dollar problems, solve $10,000 problems. If you focus on these huge use cases, which is what unfortunately a lot of customers come to us with, hey, we want to do this thing. It's going to look at a car. It's an insurance company. It's going to tell us what the accident was. It's going to tell us what insurance policy they're going to apply for. It's going to tell us the parts that we're going to need to fix it. A 15-piece thing, and it's okay, awesome. You could do that. AI could do that. You're going to spend 18 months doing that, and in that time, you're going to deliver no value to the organization. So break that down into its pieces and focus on what are the small things that we can do now, leveraging prompt engineering, leveraging RAG, these more basic techniques to deliver value to the organization quickly. And I guess just because we're talking about use cases real quick, the identification part doesn't seem to be the challenge. As long as you're opening up funnels for the organization to share ideas, you will get a lot of ideas. It's the prioritization part that's going to be challenging. You need to create a process, a systematic way to analyze use cases in an objective way and assess priority and build your roadmap. And there is a way that we do it. I don't have time to go through it, but just break down the solution into its components. Data, model, compute. That's really all Gen AI needs to work. So where is the data? Scale of data doesn't exist to data is actively managed in an existing process. Model. RAG or prompt to custom model, and then compute. What is it going to cost us? Can we put this in the cloud? Do we have to put it on-prem? Break it down in each of those components, assess it, kind of numerically, and you should be able to calculate ROI pretty quickly, and then make an informed decision.
Cool. So look, we promised that this was going to be learnings, lessons from the front line, right? So Frontline doesn't always work perfectly. Sometimes things don't go quite as planned, and let's forget for a moment our boss is in the room. But
trenches here.
Tales from the trenches. Give us a couple of examples that we can share with the room of things that perhaps didn't quite go to plan, so that these guys can effectively learn from our mistakes.
I mean, I think we've talked a lot about it already, but I mean, I guess like culture eats strategy for breakfast is kind of what we've learned. Like, if you don't have the people that are ready to use the technology, it's a massive waste and investment. So, we rolled out certain tools that are really high powered, and no one not only weren't able to use it, but they were afraid to use it. So there's this AI anxiety that people have that you need to make sure they can get over. So don't make this a technology problem. Don't just invest in big, fancy technology. Work with your people, work cross-functionally, work with your line of business people to make sure they're ready to actually integrate it into a process and use it successfully. So I think that was a big learning for us, and when we work with customers now, education, training is just fundamental to what we do.
Excellent. Right, guys, I really want to answer some of these questions because I really appreciate that people have taken the time to do this. And I think this is quite relevant because even though we're not a particularly small organization, there was a fairly small team that was working on Mindspark. So forgive me while I read this. But the question was, how can a small IT department that has been tasked with implementing AI with limited experience and internal resources start from ground zero? I think you should probably both give us a pretty short, because we're running out of time, but I'd like to hear both your opinions on that.
Work with SHI. First answer.
Do you want to kick us off, Aaron?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think kind of like, going back to the aligning culture and strategy, I was on a call with a customer, and everybody was kind of silent at first on potential use cases, but then someone brought up the point that they would love to, improve their customer service experience. And then I asked, well, what's the kind of the most bothersome part about that? And she said customer verification. And so kind of going back to John's point of breaking a problem down, you can verify a customer, right? A lot of times they're the same type of questions. And so that's something that an AI can do very well at high accuracy. So breaking down a very small problem like that can empower your team. And then from I'm thinking about the architecture right now, that would be actually really simple to solve, So maybe even less than 200 lines of code. So having a small, value-creating problem like that can not only empower, the customer service team really quickly, but it's also a quick win, like we've talked about, for your dev teams to build that momentum.
Yeah, I mean, I would just start small. I mean, like he said, I think, you got to talk to people that have been there. Like, there are a lot of vendors with a lot of ideas and a lot of products that want to throw you, but you got to talk to people, like us maybe, that have been there and realize that there are small, low-cost ways to deliver value to the organization. Like, that was really our Mindspark platform. I think getting something safe and secure in your environment where your people can start using even just the foundation model, with no customization. I know that's a little faux pas, but there's even value in that. Just getting them a safe version of ChatGPT with some training, they'll start to deliver some value just using that. So what is the absolute lowest cost, lowest complexity, lowest risk way to get AI into your ecosystem and get your people using it? We can help you make that decision. It doesn't require ML expertise. I was in sales, 5 years ago, and I'm running our ML initiative. So that might tell you a little bit about it's not a technology thing. It's not as complicated as you think. It's about understanding the problems of the business, working with line of business leaders, and applying it correctly.
And plus one to that, sales, right? You're
love salespeople, by the way.
No, I mean, if you think about
sales.
it, sales superpower is language, and now you've got programs that are written by natural language, so you salespeople should feel really empowered about that.
For sure.
All right, so we've talked about sort of non-techies getting involved in AI. Actually segues perfectly into one of the questions that we have here, which is, what do engineers do to actually upskill themselves? And that must be something that you've been looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say just start small. Everything's about starting small. It's actually not that difficult, I don't think. Just like when you were importing a package, I don't know how many Java programmers or Python programmers, import something like a NumPy, right? Now you can do all these numeric calculations and scientific stuff just with this library. So you can think of models similarly, of importing a model, and then there's different ways that you can use it. And you're starting to see more and more tools out there that are both open source and things that are really robust, like NVIDIA's AI enterprise system, that'll enable you to have this tool set to do some really cool things faster. So I'd say from a technical perspective, anybody that's in tech loves using new tech. So if you have any type of an initiative that they're going to be able to use these new tools, I think they'll be excited about it. And just maybe give them a little bit of time and let them share their knowledge with the team to accelerate that learning.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's come to you, John, because I know, again, you and I have talked about this a little bit, but question here is referencing that you referenced fail fast, fail quick.
Yeah.
Obviously, at some point, you have to start proving value. You have to start measuring metrics. Yeah. I know this is very much a work in progress for you at the moment, but give some insights as to the sorts of metrics that you're sort of focusing on for Mindspark.
For sure. So Mindspark is internal, or SHI, Mindspark Project Mindspark is really focused on internal productivity. So it's a lot of internal metrics so far. So the Mindspark app itself, our primary metrics are time savings and AI literacy. So that's what we're trying to drive. So from a time savings perspective, we have a survey. There's been about 1,200 employees that have filled it out. And on average, employees are saving about 4 hours per week. Our goal is 20% productivity gains. So people are 20% more productive. So we're already at 10%. And it's really only been in production for about 6 months. So we really feel like we can get there by next year. Then AI literacy, we run an AI literacy survey every 6 months. And we have 60% of SHI capable of writing a quality prompt, which I think is a huge milestone for us. Like having more than half of your company be able to interact with AI is pretty awesome. So there is a meta AI literacy scale. It's like a peer-reviewed scale that you can use. There's a survey in the study that we use. So go check it out. Google Meta AI literacy scale. So that's what we use to assess literacy. We have a number of other projects like our service desk that has a pretty clear KPI of automating 20% of service desk tickets. So currently we've fully automated 10% of our service desk tickets are done entirely through AI. Coaching is so we grade role plays. We grade the quality of role plays. So there's a numeric score, and we want to see that increase. And then really just generally speaking with use cases, make sure when you establish the use case, you understand what are the line of business KPIs related to that. You need to understand a metric. It needs to be measurable, or you're going to do something and you're not going to know if it was successful or not. So as you're building out these use cases, work with the stakeholders, work with the team that's doing it, and it's basically just how is it working today, and how are we going to improve that? Save time, save money, or generate revenue are kind of the three things.
Perfect.
Does that answer your question?
Certainly answers this question, which is great. So we have a number of questions about security, right? No great surprise. I think we would have expected that. Some of them are definitely beyond my pay grade to fully understand. So I'm going to stick with the simple one because I know how to ask that question. But I think it doesn't need to, your response, Aaron, I'm going to come to you, doesn't need to be specific to Mindspark. Maybe think about more just general customer engagements. But what are the key cyber concerns when it comes to AI, and how are they different to sort of, I almost call it the traditional cyber concerns of network and endpoint?
Yeah, I mean, it's a important question. So there's one kind of, I'd say, expert in security around AI coined it perfectly. He said that people that are looking to attack a system are looking for two things: access to data and access to exploitable code or executable code. And a model gives you both. So this person actually, they had an AI model that was, scanning packets. I'm sure you guys have heard, of tools like GuardDuty that does AI analysis. Well, this tool was actually attacked, and they weren't thinking about that as an attack, and they learned a lot from that. So from a model standpoint, you're starting to see some new tools. I'm sure you've seen Palo's AI runtime security. There's another company that we're working with called Hidden Layer. They do all the model scanning for the models on Azure's hosted models. So there's all types of different threat vectors. If you look at OWASP, they have their LLM top 10 and their ML top 10. MITRE Atlas has a really good look at kind of evaluating machine learning and AI vulnerabilities and security threats. But I would say, kind of going back to the point we discussed earlier, a lot of it has to do with how you design your applications. So if you have a lot of very small points of entry and multiple layers of security around both your data and then your application security, that's going to help. And then there's something called MLSecOps. I'm sure you guys have heard of DevSecOps. But when you're actually deploying an application, you can do things like pen testing against models and things like that. So you're going to have to build model relevant security tools when you're building AI into your applications, and that's going to be part of your pipeline. But I would say start there, MLSecOps, and then there's another deep topic that I'm a big fan of, which is compliance as code or governance as code. And so there's ways that you can actually, in your centers of excellence around AI deployments, make policies around how you deploy and host your applications, and then you can actually benchmark against your policies by writing code that actually do those tests, do those model scans, do those kind of evaluations on your top threats. And then when you have that risk kind of assurance internally, because you're benchmarking regularly, that'll definitely lower your risk and increase your security in terms of AI applications.
Cool. Excellent. Right. We have a load more questions. Thank you so much for submitting them, and apologies that we are out of time. What we'll do is I'm going to share the questions with you. I'm going to have you respond to that, and then we'll put it kind of, as they would say in a podcast, in the show notes. The follow-ups, we'll send those responses out. John, in the 30 seconds that we've got left before they usher us off the stage, tell people about this QR code and what it leads to.
Yeah, so we've essentially documented. So I mentioned there were no blueprints when we started, so we created a blueprint that basically documents our journey from zero to now and the steps that we took along the way. And we have services really at each step to get you from one step to the next. So the blueprint is on shi.com. I believe if you click this QR code, you're going to get a request form and to do an AI readiness assessment, which is really the first step in that blueprint. So the first thing is working with you, me, Aaron, my team, sitting down. Are you ready for AI? Where are your gaps? What do we need to do to get off the ground? Again, grounded in our own experience. So yeah, I mean, those questions, we're customer facing. We're happy to talk whenever. Talk to your AE. Happy to get on the phone and talk through all this stuff one-on-one.
Excellent. Chaps, thank you very much. Thank you for all those fantastic questions.